Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm so excited that you're here. Um,
You too.
for everybody who's listening, who are you today? Hi, welcome to this
Today
podcast.
specifically. Thank
Yeah.
you. My name is Nicole Ferguson. I am a actor, and I'm currently on the My Fair Lady national tour. We are in
Oh,
Cleveland, Ohio.
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Tell the listener, just like it could be a synopsis, you can go into it. It's really
Yeah.
your journey. How what transpired to get you to this particular tour? Or as in like what has been your prior experiences in life?
Sure. Gosh. So I went to school for music theater at Oklahoma City University,
Mhm.
and I graduated having played character actors and much older women. Because this is a podcast, I'm 5'8", so I'm quite tall, and I think that just earns you some age and maturity,
Mhm.
especially in educational theater. So I spent sort of the beginning of my time in New York figuring out what it actually meant to be in my 20s and be myself, and be in a world where everyone is talented and wonderful and has a lot to offer. So I honestly spent a lot of my beginning time not working and going to class and trying to learn to do new things with my voice and figuring out what New York was and where I might fit in, or rather where I might carve out space for myself,
Mhm. What brought
which
you
is, I
to New
think,
York initially? Like, what made you choose New York?
oh gosh, I think it's just because I had to do it. I always wanted to, and I'd regret it if I didn't.
Mhm.
My parents live in DC, and that's where I grew up half in Hong Kong, half in Northern Virginia. So my parents live right by DC, and I knew, knowing that DC is a fantastic theater town,
Yeah.
if I moved home, I'd never leave. And I really wanted to leave, and I wanted to do it, and I wanted to say that I did New York, made it in New York,
Yes.
made something happen for myself in New York. And quite frankly, that's where a lot of my community was going. So I felt really taken care of by the people around me. So that was also a nice incentive.
Cool. So you were in New York, you were taking classes. Were you taking
Yes.
mostly like musical theater stuff, on camera stuff, scene study? What was your
It was
class situation?
mostly music theater, and then I branched out to doing some stuff with casting directors, and that was a huge, I don't want to say wake up call, but it was a big mental shift as far as the business of theater
Yeah.
and how you might truly feel and authentically be one thing, and people might project something very, very different onto you.
Yep.
And it's kind of your choice as the actor if you would like to figure out how to do those things that people are projecting onto you, or you want to really stay your course and find what might be more authentically you. And if you're
May
lucky, yeah, please.
may I ask like what you felt was projected from them towards you at that time?
Oh yeah, gosh, I'm trying to remember who it even was, but she basically stopped me mid song. She goes, "What are you doing?" And I was like,
Mhm.
this is a trap. And I went, well, I'm singing for you, because I was like,
Mhm.
And she goes, you're like, what are you doing? You're a pop rock girl. Like, you need to be singing stuff at that point. It's going to age me. Huh. At that point, she was like, you need to be going in for Spider-Man. You need to be doing da 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 da. Like all the different modern musicals that was nothing that I had A, trained for, or B, had felt drawn to.
Mm.
But I was really being painted as, oh, I'm a tall brunette, and a tall brunette that happens to be mixed. So there is a certain like vibe about that I think people were really leaning into at that point. And it was, you're the modern high belt girl. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. And that was something that I quite frankly didn't know how to do at that point.
Right.
And then ipso facto, fast forward a couple years, the first bigger commercial job that I got was Sister Act. So she figured out how to belt. She figured out
Clearly.
how to do the
Clearly.
modern music
Yeah.
theater thing. So it was interesting, but I still love the roots of what I do, which is definitely more, I think, clearly golden age stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that was a really big fork in the road for me. It was like, okay, I can either figure out how to do this, or really cement my feet into the ground and be like, no, you have to come to me. And I think now, in hindsight, I've done sort of a mix of the two.
Yeah.
And
And
I very much enjoy surprising people with like legit soprano stuff, and having them be surprised when it comes out of someone that looks like me.
Yeah. Well, also because you're not that resumes mean anything, but your resume
Mhm.
really is peppered with both,
Yeah,
I
it
think.
is. And that's what's I think I love about what I bring to the table is we can do a lot of things, but what I have found is that that is difficult for creatives behind the table is okay, but if you don't tell me who you are, I think I was expecting people behind the table to figure out who I was versus me
Correct.
telling them who I was, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And where I started to find a lot of I don't want to call it success because I think that's not the right word for it, but where I started to get traction and
Mhm.
actually started to get into artistic conversations in the room were when I went, this is what I want.
Good.
If you're not on board, that's fine. The train's going to just keep moving.
Yes.
But, if people were like, oh, like that became kind of a turning point and was really fun for me. And a really tangible example of that is when I was still non-union, I was auditioning for the non-union Cinderella tour, and I think I was in a holding room of 500 gorgeous women in gorgeous dresses, and I walked in with, like, I think it was, like, jeans and a tunic top and heels, and I was like, "Great, I'll be singing for the fairy godmother." And they
Amazing.
were like, "Oh." And I was like, "Yeah, has anyone sung this yet?" And they were like, it was 10 AM, I was in the first group.
I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with this.
And I just did it, and I didn't hear from them for months, but then eventually I got called back for, like, a final callback for in that group of women. I didn't end up moving forward with the show,
Mhm.
but it was something that taught me a lot as far as, like, I could have had let them figure out where I fit, or I could have said, "This is exactly what I want,
Right.
and if this isn't the place for me, that's okay."
Yeah. I've done
Yeah.
the same thing. I mean, if I think even back to, like, the band's visit, I auditioned with Alanis Morissette.
I love that.
People were like,
I
"What are
love
you
that.
singing for?" I was like, "I'm not doing what you think I'm gonna do. Like, I'm
Mhm.
doing what I wanna do, and therefore you
Yeah.
will learn about me." Right? It's
Yes.
that choice of, like,
Mhm.
you are eventually, hopefully, going to ask me to do material from the show anyway, in which case
Mhm.
you will then see me do the material that you want me to do. But up until that
Mhm.
point, why am I not doing what I wanna do so that you learn about who I
Mhm.
am? Yeah, I love
Yep.
that so much. So, thank you for sharing with our audience that there isn't one right way, but I'd say in
No.
my personal opinion, at least you can exit the room knowing that you did what you wanted and that there's
Oh, yeah.
ownership in that. And so there's
Well,
no
that's the only thing
regret.
we have control over,
Exactly.
is
Exactly.
what we do. That's it.
Exactly. So flash
Yeah.
forward after you had this, I guess, shift in the, well, I'm going to show you what I do and you either take it or leave it. How
Mhm.
did things start to transform a little bit for you in the work that you were given or seen for?
I think I had more ownership in it,
Mhm.
and I will say it was really difficult for me to call myself an artist. That's something that has always been difficult because I think the examples that I saw were those of intense irony, not
Mm.
an intense authenticity.
What
And
do you
so
mean by
learning,
that?
um, this is so judgment on my part when people are like, "I'm an artist."
Yeah.
And it's like, sure, great. But it's a whole mindset, it's kind of like this is a horrible, horrible example, but it's the only one that's in my mind. It's like the difference between diet and like lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That one is temporary and for a very specific short-term purpose, and one is long-term
Mhm.
and like a belief system and a thought process. I think
Yeah.
that's maybe what I'm referring to. And that it's everyone has their own journey, everyone has their own thing, but for me, I just saw people saying that and it just didn't it felt extraordinarily self-serving
Mm.
versus actually being authentically honest about how you live your life, how open you are, and maybe I just hadn't found my own people at that point, but it felt very trite to
Yeah.
me. But now I really understand what that means, and I think a lot of it is about being present and accepting exactly where you are and not wishing or hoping that you had tools that you do not have.
Yeah.
And something that I when I coach, I tell my students, I'm like, you are the artistic event right now.
Mhm.
Like you can't change. You can hem and haw, you can be upset that you can't do XYZ. You can be upset that you didn't take this class 3 years
Yeah.
ago, but it's right now. And I think that's what started happening is I got comfortable being like, this is me right now. It's gonna get better because we thank goodness we're not in the crew that peaked in high school.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep growing, but this is me right now. I can't change it. So if you're down, I'm down. And if you're not, then that's okay. Because
Right.
I think I saw so many people so upset all the time, especially after auditions, and so confused why things weren't happening for them. And I think this is me being a middle child. When you see something happening, you go, not that way. You know, you go, that was a good try, but I don't want that. So let me try this. And it became very freeing. And also viewing, this is hilarious, but viewing the people behind the table as trapped. Like
Like
I
in a
can literally,
cage.
yeah, oh yeah, they
Yeah,
have
yeah.
to sit there. I mean, within reason, but they have to sit there and listen to me. They
Right.
have to sit there and experience whatever I bring into the room. So honestly, poor them. You know, they have,
Or lucky them, but
or
yes.
lucky them. But I guess the dark humor in me is like, oh, you
Yeah.
poor thing, you're trapped.
Interesting.
And that became huge for me, being like, you have to sit there and listen to me. So I might as well bring my A game and we can all have a positive experience. And then also really going for human connection.
Yeah.
That was a big one. Like actually having conversations, not just like, hi, yes, I'll be singing this, but like it actually forces people behind this table to stop and like
Right.
remember that they're dealing with human beings. I think that's going to be, hopefully, knock on everything. It'll be a little bit different now after like COVID and having time apart and really cherishing those in-person moments, but really just trying to be a person
Mhm.
was huge, and not trying to be what you think people want you to be, because that's exhausting.
And also, most of the time they don't even know.
Exactly. We put so much, we think people, like, it's like the adults in the room, in
Yeah,
quotes. We think they have
correct.
everything figured out. They have no idea, just as much as we don't.
Correct. Yeah, I was teaching a
So,
master class and that
mhm,
exact thing came up where it was like,
mhm,
if they knew what they wanted, they wouldn't hold
mhm.
auditions. They'd give a straight
Yeah,
offer for this track. They wouldn't
exactly.
waste their time, money, energy, resources to try to
Mhm.
figure it out. If they
Right.
knew, and
Mhm.
you wouldn't be here. So like
Exactly.
be the thing that could answer this puzzle piece, and then they
Mhm.
can stop their auditions and no one has to be quote unquote trapped behind that table ever again.
I
Like,
know.
we're all
Mhm.
released from the room and can go home and, snuggle with our dogs. So now that you've figured out how you are showing up, you have created a way in which you audition and you
Mhm.
feel ownership over that. Talk about, I guess, the process to get to this tour, or maybe like
Mhm.
the jobs that led up to this
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
particular moment.
Um, Goodness. So for me, I was super lucky and I had a outside relationship with Bart Shear, the director.
Mhm.
He knew me as just Nicole, not as Nicole the actor. And honestly, that kind of made it worse to audition for him
Mm.
because when someone knows me, I'm like, oh man, if you think I suck, this is so awkward.
Oh,
But as opposed to someone brand new, where I'm like, if you think I suck, like it doesn't matter.
yeah,
It's not like I know you.
yeah.
Um, so that actually was really stressful because he called me in for King and I,
Mhm.
and on Broadway, and but it was for the Tuptim track. I know myself well enough to know that that is not my track. Um, it's just not something that is in my wheelhouse as far
Mhm.
as character. But it was my first time invited to audition for a show at Lincoln Center. It was my first time auditioning in front of that entire creative team.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to say no. I said, okay, great. Let's see what we can do. Because in being who I was and bringing myself to the Tuptim material, that's when everyone went, oh, this isn't your track.
Right.
Your track is where a wonderful actress who I've yet to meet, and I'm very excited one day to meet her, is Ann Sanders.
Mhm.
At Lincoln Center, she covered both Lady Chiang and Mrs. Anna, the joys of being a mixed Asian American. And that was the track that was going to be correct for me, or at least where I fit and I should say, I was a problem solver and a solution for
Yes.
them. It just wasn't available. So when the tour came round, I went in and auditioned with Lady Tiang and Mrs. Anna stuff, and that one happened to work out. And it happened to work out very well. And I did that tour for a year and a half, and that
Yeah.
was great and fun. I learned so much. It was my first equity job. So that's
Yeah.
why I got my card. And then after that, oh gosh, what happened after that? Then Merrily happened. I did Merrily Roll Along with Fiasco at Roundabout, which was so great, so fun. Getting to do a show with like the Stephen Sondheim
Yeah.
was ridiculous. And that kind of gave me some, it gave me an oomph Like, not just one person took a chance on me. More people are taking chances on me, and I'm
Yes.
fooling more people, It's kind of the funny way to
Outrageous.
say, it's like I'm
Outrageous.
tricking everybody. So when this came around, honestly, I had a coworker at Marilee, um, who said, like, "Nicole, why don't you audition for Eliza?" And I went, "No, absolutely not. This is not the part for me." Because what I had seen was not really people that looked like me playing that part, if I'm going to be
Yeah.
100% honest. Everyone was very petite and small and fantastic, just not like me. So I was like, oh, well, that's not a puzzle piece that I could fit into.
Right.
Um, when I got called in for My Fair Lady, I believe I was at home helping my parents move plants. It's how the glamorous people live. But I remember getting that packet and it was like 60 pages. And I was like,
Jeez.
oh no, oh no, oh no. And I wasn't sure about going back on tour,
Mhm.
but I had just signed with an agent for the first time. And I'm very grateful because they sat me down and they were like, listen, it's Eliza Doolittle.
Mhm.
That's a calling card on your resume. And I was like, okay, okay, let's try this. Let's do it. And I kind of walked in with an opinion, but very much like, I don't know, guys.
Yeah.
So there was a sense of playfulness, I think, to that interaction that I don't know I would have had it been something that I really, really wanted and like wanted to
Mhm.
like, this is a dream and da 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 da. And I feel kind of, quite frankly, like an asshole saying that it wasn't a dream,
No.
and now having it. But for some people, that is like,
Yeah.
that's the mecca. Now being a part of the tour, being in the ensemble, covering Eliza, having all the opportunities that I've had, I couldn't be happier that it worked
Oh,
out. And I couldn't be happier
yay.
that I'm in this show. I mean, especially having a show shut down, COVID, coming back to it. But yeah, that's sort of the through line journey
Yeah.
of how I got here.
Ugh, it's
Yeah.
gorge. It's gorge. It's really as somebody who's like peripherally watched this
You really
blossom
saw me
for
from
you.
the beginning. You really saw me from the
Yeah, but
beginning.
like
Yeah.
peripherally, I feel
Yeah.
like I've seen it happen from the sidelines and maybe there's some objectivity to that because I wasn't so
Mm,
clearly as intimately involved, it's your life.
mhm.
But I think that it's something really wonderful to watch you because I feel like also in some ways we were mirroring each other. Like we both hadn't been represented until
Mhm.
much later into our careers. Like
Yeah.
people were taking risks on us, whatever that means, big risks, quote
Mhm.
unquote, whatever for us being us. There was just like
Yeah.
I felt there was like a symbiotic peripheral thing that was happening. So it's just really wonderful to see you feeling and being so grounded in all of this and also just like it all working out the way it's supposed to, whatever that's supposed to mean,
Right. Yeah.
like who
Mhm.
even knows? Like none of that is. But anyway, I just had to affirm that. Um,
Thanks.
while we're here, I want to
Yeah.
talk about touring. You've had two bouts of
Please.
it. I've had a single bout of it,
Yeah.
and it is a beast, and it is one
Mhm.
that is not a one size fits all. But
Surely not.
I am curious between your two tours if you learned
Mhm.
something, and clearly, obviously, now we are dealing with touring in the time of COVID, which
Yeah.
is a whole other situation.
Whole other
But
bag.
besides the COVID aspect of it, I'm
Mhm.
curious between the two tours if there were things that you like learned the first time that you were like, this must be different the second,
Mhm.
or if it was, or if there were like lessons learned that you were like, oh, actually, this I loved and I must do this again. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Um, well, I to back it up even further, like the Sister Act tour that I did, a non-ec bus and truck tour, that
I didn't realize that Sister Act was a tour. For whatever reason, I thought that
oh
was
yeah.
cool. So you've
Oh
toured
yeah.
many a time. That's why
It
you're
was
here.
it was a one-nighter, baby.
Yeah. Well,
That
let's
I
talk.
mean,
Yeah, let's go there.
yeah.
And then, ooh, okay.
So that was an experience in itself. That was my first, as far as like theater jobs go, bigger commercial job. I think it's really important to recognize when theater is a bit more commercial as opposed to like a regional, smaller production, because there are just different things that go into it and different expectations, and different allowances as far as breadth. I'll say that. Um, the non-union tour that I did, bus and truck, I was a swing and I was the dance captain. And
Oh
that is
boy.
speaking as someone that is a mover plus. She is a fourth row dancer. She's a first row mover. And getting into a position of peer leadership on top of truly not knowing what I was doing. Like, because I had no experience. And I
Yeah.
remember when the choreographer asked me, she was like, "Hey, would you be my dance captain?" I laughed in her face because I thought she was kidding.
Right.
And she went, "No, no, no, I'm not kidding." And I went, "Oh, shit."
Wow.
And I was like, you can't tell someone at that point for me. I was like, I can't tell someone with like all these Broadway shows that she's wrong about me. That would be awful. Like
Mhm.
I got to step up. I got to pull up. I got to do this. And I'm really glad because I learned that peer leadership is not my favorite.
Great.
It is something that I am adept at, but I would rather not, because it adds a lot of pressure and you can start to really take on people's unhappiness that has nothing
Mm.
with your paycheck or your role
Mhm.
because you end up being someone that people go to, especially if you are a good leader and you do know how to talk to people and have good conversations. I had to learn how to say, "I am so sorry that is happening to you. I wish that wasn't. It is above my pay grade."
Good for you.
And that took like 5 months out of
Yeah.
like a 9-month tour, so that took a very long time, but that was a huge lesson from that one. And quite frankly, like, doing a bus and truck tour makes a 1-week sit-down equity tour look like a spa day. So, anytime someone's like, "Oh, 1-weekers," I'm like, "I'm not the person to talk to about this. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. I
Yeah.
don't have supportive words about this."
Yeah. Yeah. Were
So,
you all
that
staying with your bus and truck, were you staying, in motels, hotels? Were you staying in did you have your own room? What was the style of that?
so it was you had a roommate that you, like,
Mhm.
signed up for. I had an amazing roommate. Her name was Jenny Boone. That's her married name now. Yes. Her name's Jenny. She's absolutely fantastic. I am still absolutely in love with her. And then we had bus buddies. My bus buddy's name is Caitlin, and Caitlin Etter. Now I believe she has a different married name. But see, everyone has lives after tour.
Yeah.
But you shared a bus seat. Someone was sleeping on the floor, someone was sleeping on the chairs. I was a floor sleeper. It was a good way to earn my stripes and a good way to really know this is what I wanted to do. Because if I could do it in that environment and still love it, then I think I was onto something. Then switching to an equity tour and doing King and I, that was like unreal as far
Was
as
that a
like feeling
production tier? Like, what tier was that?
production tier D. It was
D.
production tier D, and then we switched to SETA, I think
Yeah.
halfway through. That was different because you could opt to room with someone or not. And gosh, we tried to save so much money.
Yeah.
We would get Airbnb, like shove people into Airbnbs. Like we really did the summer camp.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
really did summer camp on that tour. And sometimes, honestly, it wasn't the best thing for my mental health. And that's what I learned as far as like having my own space. And quite frankly, as you get older, you just
Yeah.
you learn what you need. You need more space, you need more time to center yourself and
Mhm.
leave work at work.
Yeah.
So that was something I learned for this tour. Another thing that I learned was, I mean, just quite frankly, it is difficult when people are in charge of you that have nothing to do with your hiring.
Right.
And that was a big thing for me coming on My Fair Lady, and a big stipulation in my contract, which was my contract that mandated what happened to me as an understudy, as opposed to someone that was not involved with the creative process in that way. So that
Can
was a
you
big learning curve for me.
elaborate what you mean by that?
In my contract for My Fair Lady, I am the first cover.
Got it.
So I have basically right of first refusal as far as like going on for Eliza. If our amazing Eliza gets sick or she has to call out, I'm the first person that gets the phone call.
As
And
in
if
and you learned this because I would imagine the tour prior, there were a couple and you didn't have the right of first refusal?
I did not have the right of first refusal, and for Mrs. Anna, there was a alternate, which when you're an understudy to an alternate, you have to understand the parameters of your job. You're there as backup. But then for another part that I understudied, there were two of us, and I was tired of getting passed over, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah,
And
very well.
it was enough times that I had a conversation about it, and I said, I'm not someone that when something is wrong, I go, "You did this." No, I sit back and I go, "Okay, what did I contribute to the situation? What questions do I need to ask?" And it was a big learning curve as far as standing up for myself and also telling someone how their decisions impacted you. Even if it's convenience and even if it's things that business wise we understand, I think it's still important as actors to advocate because we are the ones that deal with the consequences of those choices in many situations, not all situations. And so that was big for me. That was big to learn that I really don't like it when someone else has control over what happens to me. And especially when
Amen.
it's things that have
Amen.
nothing to do with my talent, that have nothing to
Correct.
do with what I bring to the table. So that was a big, big lesson. And I told myself I wouldn't go on tour unless I had a little bit of protection because that emotional stress when when it is when it isn't clearly communicated what is expected of you or what is going to happen to you, the what if can become just a just a pill.
Yeah, it's relentless. It's all you
Yeah.
have. It's like, well,
Mhm,
when and if, what
mhm,
if? Yeah, and then that's all you have to rely on, especially if you're sitting backstage every night hoping
mhm,
or being ready, and then the ready potentially comes, but it's not your ready, it's the other person's ready, which is great. Good on them.
mhm.
And
Yes.
also, when is it yours?
Mhm. And
Yeah.
I do think I would edit how I did this again
Mm.
because by advocating for myself, I have to acknowledge that I disenfranchise the opportunities of another person. Like I have to accept that. It was a business choice on my end. But I think moving forward, I would really want it to be great. I get rehearsed, the other person gets rehearsed. Then once both parties are rehearsed, 50-50 split
Great.
and mandate that in my contract.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think it would probably be a very big fight. But I also don't imagine another scenario in which I would choose to understudy unless it was on Broadway.
Good on you. Good on you.
Yeah.
And it's
That's
hard
so
to
that's the journey.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's hard to having been there myself and my
Mhm,
first contract with the band's visit, I was negotiating without representation,
mhm,
and that was a very, very contentious learning experience as
mm,
a female who's quote unquote
mhm,
greener, who's never toured before,
mhm,
who's, trying to ask for things that are not unreasonable, that are frankly being told to me by the person who played my part on Broadway, being like, these are things you're going to need. I played this part for however long,
mm,
like, ask for these things, run roller skates. If they're going to use your hair, like, ask for things. And it
mhm,
was such an interesting, I learned a lot. I learned
mhm,
a lot about the um, logistical side of things that
mhm,
so often if you're shielded, which is the purpose of having an agent, but if you're shielded
mhm,
by representation, they're doing that for you. And in some ways,
mhm,
it takes away the agency of it
mm,
um,
no pun
from
intended.
yourself, literally, because you're doing it. But,
Yeah.
that experience was such a learning moment for me of what are
Mhm,
the things now that if I were to
mhm,
ever go back into, like, what are the absolute non-negotiables, and
mhm.
where am I able to be more flexible for others and myself?
Yeah, and it's hard, it's really hard because you don't want to be someone at least for me,
You don't be
I do
difficult.
well, and it's not even I think it's I think this has to do with being Japanese, I'm very
Mhm.
community oriented, I never wanna take away from the community,
Yeah,
but then learning that, okay, but if I don't maybe take these 2 things away from the community and keep them for myself, then
yeah.
there's nothing left for me,
And
and
also,
then
though, if you aren't able to have what you need, then you actually aren't showing up for the community.
yeah,
So,
that's
I
true
mean, it
too.
is a cyclical thing. Like, if
Mhm,
you're not getting what you need to be present,
mhm,
then the community isn't being the community it could be if you were
mhm.
feeling full.
Yeah, I love that.
So you're not
Yeah.
taking anything away in order to fill your cup to show up to the community, I would
Yeah,
argue.
fair point, fair point.
I wanna go back a little bit to, like, the different tiers, just laying them out for people who are listening if
Yeah.
they don't necessarily know it, because I know Band's
Mhm,
Visit was also tier D, and
mhm,
then that switched over t
mhm,
when it came back from COVID to SETA as well.
mhm.
Um, just logistically, what that entails between the 2.
I mean, I feel like the 2 biggest things I can speak to are a salary,
Mhm.
your minimum where your baseline that you're negotiating is different, and then also how per diem is dealt with in hotels and
Correct.
housing. On production D, we got our full per diem, and whatever we decided to do with it, was our choice. So, you get the full amount, and you can either be in the company hotel that they pick for you or provide an option for, or you can find your own housing. The difference with SETA is that there is a company option or there's an opt out, and your per diem is based on that.
Right.
That's sort of, I think, the biggest difference as far as just like logistically what it's like to tour.
Yeah.
And I guess like that around when the company's paying for your hotel, the company gets the hotel points, not you. That's why production's really sweet because you paying for it, you get the points.
Yeah.
You always get your flight though.
Yeah.
But yeah, baseline salary I think is the other big difference. And then I do believe there's like scheduling things that create, that determine who's eligible for what tier. But I can't speak to those with
Yeah.
confidence.
Well, I know because SETA stands for short engagement. I think it's short
Yes.
engagement tour. So basically, you're
Hmm.
allowed to do more split weeks, which would mean like you can split half your
Yeah.
week. You can have a
Hmm.
shorter engagement in a city.
Hmm.
Um, and I know also that it deals a lot more with overages. So it's like if
Yes, there's a
you
different overage amount. Yes, you're right.
exactly. So if you were in a contract that is, say, a production contract, and
Hmm.
your show is playing in Chicago, and they're
Hmm.
supposed to make, I'm going to keep numbers really low, like not normal. Like you're supposed to make $100 your
Hmm.
entire time that you're spending there for the month,
Hmm.
and they make $500. They've
Hmm.
surplused, so the $400 basically would get split amongst the
Yes.
cast and the crew or whatever for overages. And for
Hmm.
SETA, they bank on there being more overages. So your
Yes.
contract
Hmm.
itself might be, less money for your base salary, but
Hmm.
because of overages, you'll make more. So hopefully
Hmm.
that's helpful, anybody who's listening. Um, I know that was something so interesting for me because I didn't know any of this
Hmm.
beforehand. And then, you'd be in a city and there's like mumblings when you're on stage with somebody and you're wearing costumes and you're mic'd and they're like, "Did you hear we're getting overages?" And you're like, "I didn't." And you're like, "Why couldn't we wait to have this conversation when we're off stage?"
All the time. All the time.
Yeah.
We face downstage during Ask It, and if you see empty seats, you go,
Yeah. We would do that too. I'm actually curious. So for you, of the many cities that you've toured, what have been
"Mhm."
some of your favorite and why?
Oh, well, I love going
Not
to
and I want to
DC.
preface this for anybody who's
Uh,
listening in the States and or like Canada, we're sorry in advance if we don't mention your city and or like you're
it's true.
welcome. Yeah. Cool.
Here's the thing, you can find something to love about every place,
Yeah.
even if it's, I love that I don't feel guilty staying in my hotel room and doing my taxes. That's a thing. Like, that is just a real life
Yeah.
tour thing. I love going to DC because I've been fortunate enough to perform at the Kennedy Center twice, and that just because that's where I spent half
Yeah.
my childhood. That and I live at home. Like, I get to, live at home, drive in, work at the Kennedy Center, peace out, and hang out with my family.
Yes.
I love that because it does create sort of the vibe as if you're working in one place and you do have a separate life, as
Yep.
opposed to eat, sleep, breathe everything with the people that you tour with, who are all wonderful. But
Mhm.
it's family. It gets to a level of family. Um, where else have I absolutely loved? Honestly, a place that I'm really excited to go back to is where we close My Fair Lady is Fayetteville, Arkansas.
We
That
didn't
town
get
is
to
cute.
go. I had such a
That
cute
town is
Airbnb lined
cute.
up.
Yeah.
Ah.
That town is super cute. I love touring in Minneapolis. Unfortunately, my favorite restaurant there closed down during COVID,
Oh,
but I
no.
love being in Minneapolis, even though I hate the cold. So
Yeah.
that says something. And I think it's Greenville, South
Yes,
Carolina.
that's my
Super
favorite.
cute.
Greenville, South
Super
Carolina.
cute.
The
You
they
can walk
have did you go
everywhere.
this bookstore? Did you do this bookstore? They have a
No.
bookstore that is on the strip, which is like all the cobblestone
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
just like it's this like little liberal haven in the middle of, a non-liberal place. And this bookstore, when you go to the back of it, had this wall that was it's like blind dating in books where they basically wrap the
Oh.
books in cardboard like paper and they write a little small description about what the book is
Hmm.
about. Say if you like these types of books, you'd like
Hmm.
this, and you have no idea what the book is, and you basically buy the book
Like
based
book
off of
roulette.
yeah, yeah, and
Yep.
there's like literally like you cannot judge this book by its cover.
Hmm.
And
Oh,
that
that's
was it
cute.
was so cute. Obsessed with the little fountain behind and
But
oh
yeah,
my god, Greenville.
it's
Yes.
really nice.
Yeah.
And Chicago. I love going to Chicago
Yeah.
because I've been lucky enough where I've been to Chicago during the summer every time.
Amazing.
God, it's the best.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Really good food. Also, Philly had
Mhm.
amazing food. That was deeply surprising to me.
We don't get Philly. We don't get Philly. We don't get
No.
Boston. We don't get Denver. I'm so sad
That's a
about that
bummer.
because I love Denver.
That's a
But
bummer.
yeah, the second national is gonna go there.
Got it. What would you say when you go to cities, what is the first or what are some of the things that you like to do while you're there, if you can, if you have the capacity?
If I have the capacity, anytime I can get outside, and walk around. That's huge.
Mhm.
Museums, stuff like that. Anytime I can get outside, food is huge. Like one amazing food trip, some treat that is like unmissable.
Mhm.
Especially like pre-COVID when like you weren't worried to like go out and stuff. It would be like sit at a bar and talk to the bartender about all of the stuff you have to do and then pick amongst that. That is the best way to have a great time anywhere.
Yeah.
Ask the bartender, they will tell you exactly where you need to go. Like
Yes.
in Cleveland, Mitchell's ice cream, that's been like the
Mhm.
thing you have to do. And we went yesterday and it was very worth it.
Great.
Very
Do
worth it.
you have any routines that you do in terms of setting up your space? And that could be
Yeah.
dressing room, as in your
Hmm.
actual space there, but
Hmm.
also your home life, whether it's your hotel or Airbnb,
Hmm.
etc.
For me, I have to even if it's just a week, I unpack. I unpack, I set everything out so I know where everything is. I'm not digging through anything.
Do
Something
you
that has
unpack like do you have packing cubes too that you
Oh,
unpack?
yeah.
Or
Oh,
you're like
packing. No,
fully, fully
I keep everything in the cube.
got
It
it.
just has to
Okay.
get out of the suitcase.
Got it. Mhm.
Has to get out of the suitcase because that makes me feel good. And then a routine that I've had that was huge, especially during really, really stressful times. It seems so silly, but I have a candle that I'm
Mhm.
absolutely obsessed with. It's a brand called Witch Please. I'm obsessed with it. And they're actually the two guys that took my headshot, Steven Truman Gray, what's up?
Yes.
Um, and that candle and doing a yoga flow every day has been a huge practice, and that is not something I normally do. That has not been in the Nicole Ferguson Reader's Digest. Um, but that's huge. I think, especially with what my job is on this tour, and having to be ready at a moment's notice, keeping my body physically mobile has been hugely key. And then
Yeah.
also getting to a grocery store.
Yeah.
So I have my food. I can feed my body with good fuel, so naughty fuel.
Mhm. Yeah.
Have everything that I need to know to have a productive week and to not have to rely on quick fixes.
Great.
That's really key for me.
Yeah, I found that that was especially when you didn't know a place so long, or especially when it
Hmm.
was you weren't there for as long a period of time, having
Hmm.
that, yeah, like, I'm taking my packing cubes out and putting them on the thing,
Hmm.
or this is my space and it smells like the thing that I love. I had a
Hmm.
diffuser, I did the same type of thing. I
Yeah,
feel like that could be all yeah, transformative,
it
these
just
small
makes
little
it feel
tricks.
like home,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's a comfort to it and a familiarity to it. I love being the person like, yeah, whatever, I can do whatever, but consistency has its merits.
Mhm. Yeah. What about in terms of the housing choices? You kind of mentioned this.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, when do you decide that you are going to bunk yourself, or when do you
Hmm.
decide that you're going to be with others? Or is that kind of you know at this point a cadence and a
Hmm.
rhythm and it's like this many weeks I'm going to need a break?
Kind of like that, honestly.
Mhm.
If there's a longer sit down, like 2 weeks or more, I usually like to have a kitchen. That way
Mhm.
I can actually cook because you get into your like pattern of the stuff that you know you can fuel your body with that works for a hotel room. I also
Yeah.
travel a little air fryer that looks like a droid. I'm obsessed with it. Um, every time I close it, I'm like, "Alito." It's fine. For things that you do by yourself. Um, but I usually like to have a kitchen if it's more than 2 weeks. Like,
Yeah.
for example, we're in Cleveland for 3 weeks. I spent 1 week in a hotel because I was coming back from an international trip, so I knew wanted to have the time to adjust by myself and be grumpy by myself. But then being with a group of people, I can be a huge recluse, but I'm
Mhm.
also a very social person, and like, having that built into my everyday life has been so nice, so lovely. And
Yeah.
like I live with my friend Colleen, who's a gem, and we live together so easily. When you find those people, you're just like,
Yeah.
"Dude, don't leave,"
Yes. I remember that
because
distinctly.
it's so smooth. And they're just some people you're like, "I love you, but I'd never want to live with you."
Yeah. Yeah, correct. Yeah, you
So
just don't
it's all a
vibe that way.
balance.
Oh, yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. Did
Now, if the
you
hotel is walking distance, though, I'm gonna do that.
well, I was gonna say, do you pick an Airbnb based off of location? Do you pick it off of the vibe? Do you pick it off of the space? What makes you choose a different type of home minus the
Honest,
amenities?
honestly, nowadays it's price.
Yeah.
Since COVID, Airbnbs are a little bit different. Like it's just more expensive.
Mhm.
So it's okay, can I afford an Airbnb around here? Because usually the Airbnb is a more expensive option,
Right.
but worth it for the extra space and the kitchen and you balance all those things out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned it. Let's talk COVID for a moment. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're going to maybe date this, perhaps this episode, given the fact that it's like a
Yeah.
moving target, but at least this leg of tour,
Hmm.
besides, the various testing and the protocol, what about this COVID time have you felt or seen the biggest shift, or noticed to be maybe a hard
Hmm.
thing, a harder
When
thing?
we when we started, we call it 2.0. So that was like what, September 2021.
Mhm.
One of the joys of tour is getting to see the country,
Yeah.
right? But with COVID, it was be careful, don't go out,
Right.
right? So that really changed how you could enjoy a place, which is why I've started exploring outdoor spaces far more and finding like places with patios is like a key factor.
Mhm.
So that was the big change is just like quite frankly just not as much freedom, but that's because you're trying to take care of your coworkers and everyone around you and keep everybody safe. So I personally think that's a fair exchange.
Yes.
That changed the vibe, but that also like brought everyone closer together because you kind of have your pod, like you have your pod of people, and once you establish the bubble, you're in the bubble.
Yeah.
So that was one of the bigger changes. Yeah, honestly, I would say that's probably the biggest change. It just changes the lifestyle of tour
Yeah.
and makes it a little bit more closed off, which is a
Mhm.
bummer because one of the fun parts of tour is you get to see the country
Yeah. Are you
and
stage
explore.
dooring at all, or is that
Nope,
totally
we're not supposed to. The occasional person will still be there and be very sweet. And if you know someone, you can be like, "Yeah, just meet me there." But no, officially, we do not stage
and
door.
no one's backstaging either, I would imagine there's no
No,
tours. Mhm.
no tours, which was like it was
I
totally one
know.
of the fun parts of like seeing like for me, like seeing my high school choir teacher and getting to like show her around
Yeah.
was so fun. And it is something that's very like whimsical, especially for muggles that don't do theater. It's like,
Mhm.
wow, that's how this works. No way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been a bigger difference. Yeah.
And how often are you all testing, or was it initially one thing and now it's morphed, or does it depend on the state that you're in?
It's morphed, I believe now. I know protocols are changing or like in process of changing right now, but
Yeah.
currently it's based on the positivity level in the state that we're in changes how often we test.
Got
Yeah.
it. Was it ever
And
every
if I'm
day?
wrong,
No, I mean,
uh it was when we would have outbreaks. Yeah. We
have
would
you
do it
had a
every day.
couple within your cast? Is that
We've
like
had two bigger ones.
okay.
We had one in Costa Mesa where we had to cancel, I believe, 5 shows.
Wow.
We now lovingly call it COVID Mesa, which, like, I love Costa Mesa, so, like, that's, like, no shade. Um, that was very stressful because at that
Yeah.
point, I think, b due to sickness and injuries and everything, I was the only person in the the building that could play Eliza at that point. Um, and I felt so bad. I think someone called me the silver bullet, and I was like, "No, no, I don't get paid enough for that.
You're like, "Different
No, no."
show, maybe they
I was
can
like,
call me
"No,
at
no,
another point. Mm-mm-mm. No, no."
no, no. Sorry, I don't get paid for that pressure." But which is a good boundary to set.
Yeah.
And then we had a breakout that I went down on,
Oh,
more recently. But listen, this I will say this cast, this company, our dance captains, they have, like, moved hell and high water
yeah,
to make sure audiences have a show to see.
yeah,
And everything, we've canceled when we've needed to, and we have made it work when we've needed to, and it has been a true Herculean effort. And I mean, our crew making all these adjustments and changes, like they don't have swings,
yeah,
and they've been rock stars,
yeah.
really, and that really, that bonds a group of people together. So
I don't
yeah,
it's
yeah.
people don't necessarily realize, and I know I didn't either, frankly, until I
Mhm,
was on the tour,
mhm,
just how many people and or aspects of it that require human
mhm.
bodies to do,
Yep.
like, we forget, like, the scrim doesn't just automatically somehow exist in this, on
Yeah.
stage. Like, somebody has to put that fly up there, to put the
Mhm,
scrim up there, and that's not one person because this thing weighs a lot. And then you have
mhm.
multiple trucks of all these things that have to get unloaded and then
Yeah.
loaded back up in certain amounts of
Mhm,
time. Like, we're not even talking about the fact that, like, you have your dresser like you have a
Mhm.
person who's going to give you your costumes that have to not be wrinkly, and then you have the people with your hair, and
That
like
you just met, by the way.
say that again. Say
That
what?
you just met,
Oh,
your
correct.
dresser.
Yeah, your
You're like,
local
"Hi, nice to
people.
meet you."
Yeah, I'm naked. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Jennifer. Truly, like we don't,
Mhm,
I didn't think about, yes, on a Broadway show or a regional contract or any, larger production, you will have people, but they're not rotating in and out of a space in the same
mhm,
way that you do when you are in various cities that are not your everyday city, and how
mhm,
that changes things. And
mhm,
I can only imagine in your 2.0 of doing this, how much more trust
mhm.
it requires, and that it already has. Like when you go into it, it already is a lot of trust. Like, we're gonna get this costume, it has to be done in 2
Yeah.
seconds, and I don't
Oh,
know
yeah.
you. But
Yep.
now it's like, I don't know you, I also don't know where you've been, I don't know what COVID situation
Mhm,
is really like. I just got here 5 hours ago on,
mhm,
on a flight, and that was delayed, and now we're here doing a show tonight, and I guess we're going.
mhm.
It's a lot.
There's a level of rose-colored glasses that you do need to tour.
Yeah.
If you are a specific person, tour is probably not for you. And I say that lovingly
Yeah.
because that's just not where you will thrive.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things I think being a swing, being an understudy, I've learned is like, is excuse my French, is this issue worth my fucks?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, like 9 out of 10 times the answer is no.
Yeah. But I think that's a great
Because
takeaway for life anyway, like,
oh
especially
yeah,
nowadays, like, is this
oh yeah,
worth my fucks? I love that.
yeah.
I
I only
will
have so
use that.
many. Do you get one of them? No, you
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
And it really makes you stop and think as opposed to I think the world that we live in with social media and everything to be a strategic thinker as opposed to a reactive audience
Yeah.
to situations. And sometimes that means I don't react to things as quickly as I would like to, but I have always thought them through and I will always back them up when I do
Yeah.
finally decide to say something or do something about it. But it
Yeah.
it it is difficult to be someone that like learning to like hold and like actually process without just reacting is huge. And I think that's another thing that serves me being on tour. Just those
Yeah.
rose-colored glasses, and you gotta protect your
Yeah.
fucks.
Can I title this episode "Protect Your Fucks"? I don't know if that would be
You
allowed,
can.
but we might try.
I've started seeing forks just in life because you never know who
People
you're
are like, "Is
around.
this
I'm
a
like,
cooking show?" All of a sudden, this
protect your
is
forks,
yeah, protect your
protect your
forks.
forks.
Um, I guess my final question about, touring in this way is the auditioning while
Yeah.
on tour. And
Mhm.
certainly, obviously, that's different now with COVID and, self-tapes being so
Very.
much more regulated, but I'm curious
Mhm.
how that's been for you.
Honestly, I've benefited from the fact that more people are doing tapes because I'm not in New York. I think what's been really fun for me is I have found so much joy now in doing audition tapes, and I know that sounds really weird,
No?
but it's a chance and, like, this is coming from such a place of privilege of having a job, but it gives me a chance to do something that's not what I do every day and
Yeah.
still use my skill set and explore and have a good time. Uh, I you know, with audition tapes, you can't be a perfectionist.
Yeah.
I I love the 3 take one if I say, "If you're prepared, 3 take wonder.
Yeah.
You get 3 takes. If you're processing and building while doing your takes, you get a couple more. But it really depends how much time you have to prep, but something that, we talked about, it's just like you have to be the artistic event in that moment. You can't wish for things that you don't have. You can't hem and haw about coulda, shoulda, woulda. It is, what do I have right now? What can I throw down? And like you really have to leave a tape being like,
That's it.
because you have to be proud of your work. That's something that You know, I think feedback from casting directors and teams is so important, but if you're proud of your work,
Yeah.
what is the feedback actually doing?
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, when you're throwing down good work and you're proud of everything that you're doing, you're like, this is great. Someone's going to get on board. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So I've actually really enjoyed it, which is a very unexpected thing for me to say. I've
Yes.
had a lot of fun because also like I think with COVID, we couldn't do this.
Yeah.
And so part of me is like, what did worrying, being upset, what did that do for my outcome? What
Mhm.
did it and the answer is usually absolutely nothing.
Okay.
Unless, there's always a situation in which I'm sure it could have helped, but 9 times out of 10, it just doesn't. So for me, it's like, okay, if I'm not going to have a good time doing this, it was already difficult in many ways to be an artist, to be an actor, to be whatever before the pandemic. We've experienced this pandemic where the world shut down. We couldn't do what we love doing. So actually, what is the point if I'm not going to have a good time while
Correct.
doing it? There are so many things around that, of course, but the core of it, I just really I could do so many other things. So if I'm gonna choose this, I'm gonna have a forking good
Yeah.
time.
Yes. Yes, you will. I guess finally, if there was is there any part of either tour life or just generally that you feel like we haven't covered that you wish you knew or that you wish
Mm.
somebody told you when you were either first starting out or considering this kind of lifestyle as an artist?
Oh, I think it's always the more and more I learn about the business of theater,
Mhm.
the more and more I learn about the logic behind decisions that usually infuriate artists.
Yes.
But the more I understand why those decisions are being, it's like having a relationship with your GM, having a relationship with the people that know so many things about what we do that have nothing to do with what you personally do on stage. That's been a lot of just like really yummy things to chew on. Like, why are these decisions made? What is actually driving decisions for touring companies? Da, 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 da. Figuring out that business side of it, because it takes away any sort of like personal out of it, so it saves you a lot of hemming and hawing in that way. And then it'll just make you a better, because at the end of the day, we're business people. Like, we represent ourselves as a business. It makes me a better business person. And then I learn what I can do to better position myself to thrive
Are you
in.
having these conversations directly being like, "Can I pick your brain?" Or are you just putting your ears to the ground being like, "What's actually happening and let me pay attention more specifically?" Or
Kind of a
both?
combo of both. Kind of a combo of both. I find that if you come into a room with genuine curiosity, people are very open to that. And without any goal besides learning. And I think that can be really difficult sometimes. It's just like, like to actually go. This is what I learned during the pandemic when I worked for an accounting company. So many times I would go, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I have no idea what this is," and getting comfortable with saying that, because I think that's something as artists and actors we're taught not to say, because
Yeah.
then it shows like, "Oh, we don't know. Oh, why don't you know this?" Right? But
Mhm.
no, saying, "Hey, I don't get this. Can you explain it to me?" actually creates a relationship with people, and you learn a lot about people when they teach or when they try
Yeah.
to walk you through something, and you get to know people that way. So that's
Mhm.
something that I've actually loved doing, is being like, this isn't like, can you walk me through this? I want to understand it, because
Yeah.
if I understand it, then I can process it and move on, or I can process it and figure out a way to make it better.
Right.
I'm a very outcome oriented person, and I think that that's sometimes antithetical to what we do, which is
Yeah.
very process oriented. But for me, if I want to understand everything that's happening to me, why it's happening to me, why choices are being made, because why wouldn't you want to understand why things are happening to you, that
Yes.
directly affect you? The
Yes.
more you understand, the more empowered and just prepared you can be
Yeah.
for life.
That's such an important lesson, and I feel like it explains why I'm a huge fan of yours because I'm very much the same way, and people are like, "Why? You have how many more questions for us?" You've already asked every possible question. It's like, actually, no, I do have a few more that I've
One more.
just maybe one. I can do one more? Okay, great.
Hmm.
I'll come back to you
Hmm.
when you let me that next time.
And
Thank you.
also telling people, like, I'm not like, it's I'm actually curious. Like,
Correct.
curiosity is real, because I do believe that there are a lot of situations in which questions are asked with a different outcome in
Oh, yeah.
mind. But for me, curiosity,
Correct.
it's an awesome thing.
Correct. Yeah, because then you know how to exist, and then it
Hmm.
doesn't become about you anymore. It just becomes about the thing, and then you know how to be. And what a better way
Exactly.
to be empowered.
And you can
Um,
protect your forks.
all your
Protect your
forks,
forks.
or I'm gonna say your fucks.
Yeah.
Yes, she said it. Nicole, I know you are, amidst your touring life and things are wild, but I am so grateful that you have taken time to talk to me and this
Thank you
community
for
so
having me.
openly. Um, amongst your boundaries and the most
Mhm.
respectful way, how can people reach out, whether they want to work with you, find you,
Oh,
all the things? What's the best way to contact
honestly,
you?
probably like DM on Instagram.
Okay.
That's
What
probably the best. At Nikki, Nikki underscore Fergie, Fergie.
perfect.
That's the best way because I'll see them faster than Facebook because I'm an old lady when it
Yeah, no, no,
comes
no, no.
to, but I get the thing. So then I'm
Great.
like, oh, I'll look at it.
I've had to turn those off because I'm trying to do those things called boundaries, and I'm like, this isn't serving
That's
me,
right.
and I get to decide when I want to look.
I love that.
She's trying. She's
Big
really
fan.
trying. Thank you so, so, so much.
Thank you for having me.